Welcome everyone to the UJA annual meeting. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Welcome everyone to the UJA annual meeting. We will begin in 3 minutes. Welcome. The UJA annual meeting will begin shortly. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to the UJA annual meeting. Our program will now begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Minsky, President and CEO of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. While I wish we could be together in person, we are so pleased to have you join us this evening for our 2020 annual meeting. Tonight's program will last less than an hour. For those who have attended this important event in previous years, you'll notice that our virtual format contains some new as well as some familiar elements. We will, of course, be attending to key matters of governance and accountability. This includes delivering a financial report, recognizing our outgoing board leadership, and electing board members who will serve in the coming year along with our chair of the board and senior vice chair. We'll also be sharing reflections from Warren Kimmel as he concludes his term as chair, as well as a conversation with our incoming chair, Linda Frum. Indeed, tonight's focus is on leadership, which matters more than ever given the extraordinary challenges our community has confronted this year. Whenever welcoming a new chair, I always take the opportunity to sit down with them to learn about their vision and what they want to accomplish during their term. When I met with Warren 3 years ago, what he said to me would set the stage for what would be the defining issue of his term: leadership. With that, let's take a moment to hear from Warren.
I took on the job legitimately to be a leader that was going to listen, okay, and try and solve the problems. I think leadership is sort of being responsible for the future. It's addressing the issues head on. It's not putting your head in the sand and say, you know what, let somebody else deal with that. I'll just try and get by as a leader. I think the hard questions you have to answer. And of course, if there's a crisis, you're going to have to deal with it. When we started this process of being chair, everybody wanted to know what you were going to try and do. What was your legacy? I didn't really have one. I just said, hey, I'd like to survive the 2 years. And who knew there was going to be a crisis? My kids can learn from their father and their mother. This would be a perfect example of leadership and accomplishing something that nobody knows what's going to happen, but step up to the plate. So when they ask you to be a leader, go for it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarita Kashitsky. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarita Kashitsky, and I'm honored to serve as board member and the corporate secretary of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. As Adam mentioned, tonight's format will be both familiar and unfamiliar. All the governance matters we'll cover are the same, but they're taking place at UJA's Federation first ever virtual annual meeting in our 103 years of existence. We certainly hope that next year we'll be back to holding an in-person meeting. With that, I'd like to begin with the agenda that was emailed to the voting members yesterday ahead of tonight's event. There will be 2 meetings tonight. The first is an election for the purpose of choosing half of the number of individual council members from among the qualified candidates, duly nominated by the nominating committee or by any 7 community individuals. The second is a meeting of the council members. During both meetings, only those individuals who are voting members will be required to do so using the voting system that will appear on their screens whenever it is time to vote. This information was also included in the program book that was circulated to council members ahead of the meeting. Warren Kimmel will act as chair of this meeting, and I will act as secretary. Let's get started with tonight's first meeting, the election of half of the individual council members. For this, there is only one order of business. This list includes those persons who were elected for a 2-year term at last year's annual meeting to cover 2019 to 2021. This is for information purposes only. This list includes those individual council members nominated for 2020 to 2022. I am advised that Tina Ehrlich moved and Shale Rosenbaum seconded the motion that those persons listed on your screen be elected as individual council members for a 2-year term. Council members can now see the contents of the motion on their screen. We ask all council members to follow the prompts and vote accordingly, which you can do right now. I declare the motion carried. The same procedure will be followed for all subsequent motions that will be brought forward at our annual meeting this evening. As the formal business of this election meeting has now been completed, I declare that this meeting is terminated.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Leboff. I'm the immediate past chair of UJA Federation and the outgoing chair of the UJA Federation Governance and Nominating Committee. With the permission of the chair of the meeting, Warren Kimmel, I will lead this portion of the annual meeting as we move to the formal meeting of our council members. In order for the business to be transacted, 25 or more council members must be present. I'm advised by the secretary that there is a quorum present and the notice of this meeting was duly published as required under the bylaw. Therefore, I declare this meeting to be regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business. The first item of business will be the approval of the minutes of last year's annual meeting. Copies of the minutes were circulated together with the program to all council members ahead of the meeting. I'm advised that Ariella Weiss and Lori Davis moved and seconded this motion for the approval of last year's annual meeting minutes. Council can now see the contents of the motion. Ask you to please cast your vote. A lot of drama as the votes come in. 93%. I declare the motion carried. The next order of business is the ratification of the appointment of the trustees of the Jewish Foundation of Greater Toronto. The list currently shown on your screen includes the names of those individuals to be appointed as 2021 Foundation trustees, with Keith Ray as the chair of the Jewish Foundation trustees and Leonard Abramsky as vice chair. We will now ratify the list of Foundation trustees. I'm advised that Allison Himmel moved and Evan Pilt seconded the motion to ratify the appointment of Foundation trustees. Council members can now see the contents of the motion on their screen and ask them to please cast their votes. Very good. I declare the motion carried.
Good evening. My name is Ariella Roringer, and I'm proud to serve as treasurer of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. UJA places a very high premium on the trust the community places in it. We strive to honor that trust by ensuring that every dollar counts in the most meaningful way possible, and we hold ourselves totally accountable. As such, you can view the past fiscal year's financial statements online at jewishtoronto.com www.ujafederation.com/financials. In the email we sent yesterday with the link to this event, we also included a link to this year's annual report. It provides a brief look back at 2020, as well as an overview of the financials. This is also available to view online at jewishtoronto.com/2020-annual-report. I will now provide briefly an overview of the financials in relation to UJA's emergency campaign for community resilience. The campaign officially launched at the beginning of June, but we began raising funds before that to meet the escalating needs of our community at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. By the end of June 30th, 2020, which is the end of this past fiscal year, UJA Federation of Greater Toronto had raised $24 million in emergency commitments over and above those of the traditional annual campaign. This was an overwhelming sign that our community can always be counted on to rally together to help those in need. Based on our projections of the growing needs of our community due to the pandemic, we determined that we needed to raise $85 million in fiscal year 2021, which is $25 million above our traditional annual campaign. This fundraising objective was the impetus to the launch of the emergency campaign. And it started in the last fiscal quarter of 2020. Funds raised will be used for critical programs and services over the next couple of years, as the consequences of this pandemic will continue into fiscal year 2022. As of Monday, December 7th, this past Monday, the combined annual and emergency campaign raised $75.5 million, representing over 12,000 gifts. This is an astounding feat, with only $9.5 million to go before we reach our goal. Fortunately, we still have a few weeks left before the end of 2020. Donations continue to flow in from community members, and we remain in awe of the generosity we're seeing. This gives us great confidence that we will achieve our target as we approach the end of the campaign. I want to take this opportunity as well to express my enormous heartfelt thanks for the thousands of donors and thousands of volunteers who have helped lead us as leaders in North America with such a successful emergency campaign. We have good reason to be very proud. We also have immense gratitude for our incredibly generous corporate sponsors for continuing to invest in UJA's work in this challenging year. Your commitment to our cause means so much. Let's now take a moment to reflect back on the spring when COVID-19 first came to Toronto.
Good evening. Here in this city, a state of emergency is being declared in Toronto, giving
record job losses. Over 1 million Canadians lost their jobs.
The legacy of COVID-19 in this country could very well be the failure to protect vulnerable seniors.
Toronto Public Health has declared outbreaks at 5 other long-term care homes and 1 retirement home.
In 2020, that was the real crisis for me in UJA. That was the point of, okay, this is when leadership kicks in. And therefore, now I had to act as a true leader, hoping that we were going to be successful in whatever we were planning to do. Then the real issue was the emergency campaign. We needed to raise another $25 million on top of the $60 million, and that was like, really? That was pretty calm. The board was pretty receptive, and I think that the professionals at UJA had everything prepared. We thought out the problems, and we addressed them. Toronto, when it came to this emergency campaign, Toronto took the lead. And again, by saying we have to address it, we have to do something about it immediately, and we did. In March and April, where the rest of the world, the diaspora, was sort of thinking about, okay, what should we do, when should we do it? They were waiting and seeing. I really saw the community come together, where the agencies work together, the schools are working together, and the professionals are working together. I'm optimistic that the community is going to be positive and moving ahead, because I've seen the response from the volunteers and from the generous supporters and all the professionals that are doing a great job.
I would like to take a moment to thank the board members and board guests who are completing their terms of office tonight. Your leadership over these past years, especially this one, has been tremendous. It has been a great pleasure working with these individuals. And in the spirit of Hanukkah, I know that beyond their service on the board, their leadership in our community will continue to light the way for many years to come. We thank the following outstanding individuals: Leonard Abramsky, Julie Albert, Eric Cohen, Rabbi Adam Cutler, Michael Davis, Tina Ehrlich, Irving Granovsky, Rabbi Daniel Korupkin, Bruce Lieboff, Harley Mintz, Henry Morton, Melissa Muscat, Karen Simpson-Radomski, Derek Sakonik, and Sarah Zagdansky. According to UJA Federation's bylaw, the terms of some of the existing directors of the Federation come to an end at this meeting, and a new board is to be put in place. The list currently shown on your screen includes the board nominees to be elected at our meeting. Some are to be elected for a 2-year term, and one is elected for a 1-year term. All these nominees were nominated by the UJA Federation Governance and Nominating Committee in accordance with our bylaw. There being no opportunity for further nominations under the bylaw, the nominations are closed. We will now continue with the election of the board. I am advised that Carol Grupert moved and Sarah Zagdansky seconded the motion to elect the incoming board members listed on your screen. Council members, please cast your vote. I declare the motion carried. The list currently shown on your screen includes the names of the UJA Federation 2020-2021 board, with those board members who were elected at our meeting, other board members currently serving their 2nd year of their term, and with board guests. To the new board of directors, we wish you behatzlacha on your work in the year to come.
According to our bylaw, the chair and vice chair of the Federation shall hold office until the annual meeting following their election, and are entitled to be re-elected on one occasion. I am pleased to report that the Governance and Nominating Committee has nominated, in accordance with the procedures set out in the bylaw, Senator Linda Frum to be elected chair and Jeff Rosenthal to be elected vice chair of UJA Federation. There being no further opportunity for nominations under the bylaw, I declare that nominations are closed. I'm pleased to put forward a motion that Linda Frum be elected chair and Jeff Rosenthal be elected vice chair of UJA Federation. I'm advised that incoming immediate past chair, Mazel Tov Warren, who is ending his term as chair at this meeting, Warren Kimmel, seconded such election. Council members can now see the contents of the motion on their screen, and we ask them to please cast their vote. I declare the motion carried. Mazel tov to Linda and to Jeff, and bechatzlacha on your work in the year to come. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Warren Kimmel, the outgoing chair, for his stellar leadership and hard work as chair. The next order of business is the appointment of PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP as public accountant for the group of corporations of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. An auditor will not be appointed to those corporations which are not required to appoint an auditor, and it will be resolved to dispense with the requirements to appoint a public accountant pursuant to the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. I'm advised that Glennie Lindenberg moved and Randy Schiff seconded the motion in relation to the appointment of auditor. You can see the contents of the motion on your screen. I ask council members to now please cast their vote. I declare the motion to be unanimously carried. As the formal business of the meeting has now been completed, I declare that this meeting is terminated.
Thank you, Serena and Bruce, for guiding us through tonight's two meetings, especially in this new virtual format. My name is Jeff Rosenthal, incoming Vice Chair of UJA's board. While I've been involved with Federation for many years, I'm especially inspired to take on this role at this particular time. There are a lot of challenges facing our community, and the next 2 years will be crucial. But I believe under Linda's leadership, we will pull through as a stronger community. I would now like to introduce our fourth video of this evening, an engaging conversation between Adam Minsky and Linda Frum.
Good evening, I'm Linda Frum, and I'm so excited that tonight I'm going to become chair of UJA Federation Board of Directors. We're really sad we can't have our annual general meeting in person, but Adam Minsky, our president and CEO, and I thought that at least we could have a socially distanced chat remotely online as part of this evening's events. And so we're going to be talking about some of the big questions facing us, but I should tell you that where we are right now is in the brand new Poslan's Theater in the Louis and Charlotte Steinberg Cultural Pavilion, which is in the gorgeous new Chef Building, part of the expanded Prosserman JCC on the Sherman campus. And this new facility is just mind-blowing. And when we all do get the chance to come and be here together and celebrate the opening, it's really going to be a fantastic day, because this is just a spectacular building. So kudos, Adam, to you and the whole team who put this together.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it really was a collective effort. There are so many volunteers who've been at the heart of getting this done. This facility is spectacular, and we can't wait to welcome everybody to it. And I have to say, I am a little bit intimidated by this chat, only because I grew up listening to your mom on the radio. She was such an incredible interviewer. So the idea of being interviewed by someone who has those genes makes me a little bit nervous.
Okay, it's not going to be scary, I promise. but it is nice. It's nice to have my mother remembered on this special night for me, because it is truly a great honor to be a part of this community and to be taking on this big role. So to that end, we're going to have a conversation about some of the big problems and questions facing our community in what has been a very difficult year. And to begin, I think we should talk about what's happened in Toronto with vulnerable members of our community. One of the reasons why I enjoy being involved in Federation so much is you really get to see the whole community from top to bottom and end to end. And I remember 3 years ago when I was chair of the campaign with my friend Ilan Protzer, and UJA organized for us a tour of the social services. And one of the things that Ilan and I did was we participated in a delivery of kosher Meals on Wheels to clients, particularly in the buildings behind the Bernard Butel Center, where people are living there in public housing. And I went with a social worker, a Federation social worker who was Russian speaking, and we visited one of the clients who was living at that time in a very rudimentary housing. The cupboards in his apartment were open and empty. There was a unmade cot and a TV with Russian cable TV streaming into his apartment. And I just was overwhelmed by just how delicate this man's situation was. And that was 3 years ago, pre-COVID. And I have thought about him a lot ever since during this pandemic, because I know there's so many like him. that are suffering as much as they were suffering 3 years ago, so much more. And in the year that I've been sitting on the board as vice chair, I've watched you and your leadership team try and triage the needs of our community as we face this pandemic, and there are already such tremendous needs. So can you talk a little bit about how you've done that, how you have been able to prioritize the most vulnerable in this time?
Yeah, it's very much at the heart of what we're doing. You know, the pandemic has been incredibly difficult for everybody in the community, but the group who have faced the most challenging time are those 1 in 8 Jews who live below the poverty line prior to the pandemic. All of the hardship that you saw firsthand is exacerbated by the pandemic, because of course one of the things the pandemic is most brilliant at is identifying the weaknesses in society and really exploiting them. And so, you know, I was overwhelmed. Bernard Battelle, the center that you described, delivers our kosher meals on wheels to low-income seniors like the person that you met. They have been overwhelmed by about 130% increase in demand. There are literally hundreds of elderly Jews in our community that we are struggling to meet the needs, who need food right now because they're in the impossible position of choosing between food and medication, for example. And we're committed to making sure that our agencies get the resources that they need to do it, because we have the most wonderful network of Jewish social service agencies. On top of it, though, there is another group that has emerged, a new group of newly vulnerable Jews. Don't forget that this pandemic started with 44% of all Canadians, including Jewish Canadians, either losing their jobs or having a serious reduction in the number of working hours. And the financial hardship on them has been extreme. And so what we've done, and I think this will be a big focus of where we go, we recognize for these newly vulnerable Jews, as well as all vulnerable Jews, that no one Jewish social service agency represents this panacea that if we could just get them to agency X, their issues would be solved. What we're doing is we're bringing together all of our Jewish social service agencies. So when these newly vulnerable Jews come to them, no matter which door they go in, they get the services of all of our Jewish social service agencies, so that we can move people from a position of being vulnerable to stable as quickly as possible as a community. And that's where our focus really is going to be.
You and your team made the decision last year to launch an emergency campaign. How have you deployed those funds? How did the campaign go?
So the campaign is still underway. It is going really well. I am so overwhelmed by the response and the generosity of community leaders, who many of whom have stepped up in an extraordinary way, understanding that there are others in our community who aren't going to be able to step up. When we work with our agencies on what the exceptional need would be, we typically run an annual campaign of about $60 million. We identified that there's $25 million in additional need. Of that, we've doubled the amount that we're giving to the most vulnerable in our community, and divided it into helping both those who were already living in poverty and needed additional services, as well as those who are newly vulnerable, to make sure that they're able to break this temporary, what we hope will be temporary, issue of poverty and difficulty that they're facing.
So you mentioned my mother, and it's actually a good segue for me, because I wanted to say that for someone stepping into this role as chair of the board, you know, we all have our inspirations and our role models. And for me, it's very much my mother's parents, Harold and Florence Rosberg, who serve as a great example to me. In addition, of course, I should say the example of my husband, who is, I think, one of the great community leaders Toronto has. But my grandparents lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and they were among the first Jewish settlers in that town. And because they were among the first, there was really no Jewish communal infrastructure when they got there. And they were successful merchants, and they were able to help people on an individual basis, the vulnerable and the needy, in the ways that you described. But they also took on a sense of responsibility for building up the communal infrastructure. And so my grandfather and his family were instrumental in creating a synagogue, the first synagogue and only synagogue in Niagara Falls. They, they did that in the 30s, and in the 50s they were able to make it grow, and so that it had a kosher kitchen for communal events, a Sunday school. And they also negotiated with the town to portion off a section of the Lundy's Lane Cemetery, which is a very important historic cemetery, but to make a Jewish section in that cemetery for Jewish burial. And this is all by way of saying that their lesson to me was that you had to take care of daily needs, but you also have to take care of the pillars of community. And I know that that also has been a tremendous focus of your time this year in this time of crisis, preserving and protecting the pillars that make our community so strong, our schools, our camps, our Israel experiences. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you've done this year to help protect those institutions?
Sure. You know, the pandemic has had this clarifying effect. Before we faced the pandemic, we understood that there was a level of vulnerability in our community, particularly for middle-class Jews who were starting to struggle to be able to afford to participate in our key community institutions, be they schools or camps or community centers. When the pandemic hurt that middle class economically, all of a sudden we understood that if that group withdraws from Jewish life, our community institutions, which rely on the program fees that they pay, would end up collapsing and disappearing. And it's that appreciation that your grandparents had of the importance of these institutions that led us to really focus on two things: the vulnerable, and making sure that nobody had to withdraw from Jewish life because they couldn't afford it as a result of the pandemic. It's had some unintended positive consequences. You know, we turned to our schools, for example, and said to them, finances aren't going to be a barrier for families this year. We are going to be there to make sure that nobody has to withdraw from the system because they can't afford it. As a result of that message to our schools and the high quality of the schools themselves, we find ourselves in a situation this year, for the first time in 17 years, we have 250 more students in our schools than we did at any time previous. For the last 17 years, the numbers have been in decline. It was very clarifying for us to see that there are many Jews in this community who want to participate in communal life, but for whom finances are a barrier. And so we are going to be very much committed to that issue, not just with schools, but with schools, with camps, with community centers, because one of the greatest assets this community has is the richness of Jewish institutional life. And we want to see everyone who wants to benefit from it benefit.
That's terrific. One last big area of focus is this, what we all feel is this growing and emerging, bubbling anti-Semitism around us. And while I think we all would agree that we're so privileged to live in Canada and it is one of the most tolerant, safest, kindest societies in the world, that we are not immune from this reemergence of anti-Semitism. And it's something that people are feeling on a daily basis, either when they go online or on campus. And I will say, I have my own experience with it. I know probably everybody watching this has had their own experience with it. In my case, for the last couple of years, about 2 years ago, I started receiving some pretty vicious anti-Semitic hate mail to my office in Ottawa. And it was pretty hardcore, like swastikas drenched in blood and, death threats and that kind of thing. And what's interesting is that my instinct when it started coming in is my assistant would either tell me about it or show it to me, and I would say, just put it in the garbage. That's where it belongs. It is garbage. Throw it out. I don't want to know about it. Don't even show it to me. And I could see she didn't really approve of this approach, but she did. But they kept coming, these letters. And about 2-3 months ago, another one came in, and she said, you know what? Let's take it to the police. This is ridiculous. And I was like, nothing, you can take it to the police, but nothing will happen. This is just part of our lives today. It's just how it is. And she's not Jewish. I don't know if I said that already, but she said, no, I'm taking it to the police. So she did. And about a month ago, I got a call from the Toronto police, and they had found and arrested the guy who sent it. Now, he wasn't just sending it to me. But it was this particular piece of mail that allowed them to catch him, which I think was as simple as he put his return address on it or something. But but the point is that he was there to be caught if you took the trouble. And that was the takeaway for me was, my instincts about this were wrong. You don't just turn your back to it and throw it in the garbage and pretend it's not there. That's not the right thing to do. And you don't assume that nothing can change or nothing can be done, because that turned out to be wrong as well. Something was done, and this guy's going to go to jail. So with that all said, what is the community approach to attacking this growing problem, and what is Federation doing?
It's a really, really important part of our strategy moving forward. Unfortunately, the hate that you experienced is not limited just to public figures who happen to be Jewish. We commissioned, together with a number of federations, a study of Canadian Jews that was done by U of T and York. And I have to tell you, one of the most alarming findings in it was that young Jews, in particular, reported a very high rate of facing anti-Semitism. I suspect largely because they are more online than other segments of the community, and the online hate is particularly vicious. But my strong belief in how we tackle this is in a proactive fashion that doesn't just limit itself to one kind of strategy. And it's actually very similar to what we talked about in helping the vulnerable, that there is no one agency that can do it on their own. A very similar thing applies here. We have the most wonderful advocacy organization called the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. I know you know it well as a member of the Senate. And they look at advocating for the community at all three levels of government, and they do an outstanding job. But that in and of itself isn't enough anymore. We have our Newberger Holocaust Education Center that is educating 10,000 plus young people on an annual basis about the lessons of what happens when hate runs amok. We have our security team that is looking at protecting the physical needs of Jewish institutions and making sure that we are interconnected with police, just like you turn to them, to make sure that our community is safe. And we're investing in Hillels on college and university campuses to make sure that Jewish and non-Jewish students are supported in making the case for why this kind of hate should not exist. It's the combination of all of those things together, focused, coordinated together, that we're going to really move the needle in countering anti-Semitism. That's why I believe so strongly in the magic of coming together as a community and taking a community-wide approach, because these challenges are not solvable one organization at a time. It really takes us coming together in order to be able to defeat them.
Well, Adam, I think you've given us a very good overview of the issues that we will be facing in the next upcoming year. I want to thank you so much for your tremendous leadership and for that of your whole team. One of the reasons why I'm so pleased to be taking on this role is because I get to work with you and the entire group at Federation, who I just have the highest opinion about, and I think that you serve us so well, and I want to thank you for that. I'm also really grateful that we have a tremendous board of directors. I'm thrilled that Jeffrey Rosenthal has agreed to come on as vice chair of the board, and I'm really appreciative of the leadership of our outgoing chair, Warren Kimmel, and our immediate past chair, Bruce Lieboff. These two men serve with such intense dedication, tireless commitment. They bring such energy, knowledge, expertise, brain power to the table. And I've learned so much from them, and I'm so grateful to them for their model. And I'm so grateful to everybody who's participating in this meeting, because everybody who's watching this is involved in Federation in some way and is contributing. And we owe them so much. We have the most incredible community. So I think with that, we will hand it back over to the official events. But it's been a delight speaking with you, and I so look forward to working with you over the next 2 years.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. While there's so much more to say about the topics Linda and I touched on. We hope that this fireside chat provided a window into some of the issues we'll be tackling together in the coming year. I'm profoundly grateful for the leadership of those who've guided our federation and, by extension, our entire community over the past few years, especially during the COVID-19 crisis. In particular, I want to take a moment to recognize and honor our outgoing chair, Warren Kimmel, whose integrity, humility, and a strong sense of purpose have had an indelible impact on both me personally and our community. Please join me in watching a brief video.
Warren is very tall.
A man of few words until you get him going.
He is athletic.
Incredible father, very family oriented.
Loves any type of chocolate.
Chocolate cake. I like to eat chocolate bars with him.
He's very mathematical.
You can't get a better role model than your own grandfather.
I love Papa because he gives me pickle tips. He always helps me.
I don't know how to phrase this nicely, still my father-in-law, was not very tech savvy.
He is my role model.
When I think of Warren, I think of a very sensitive and humble leader.
He's a real leader.
Really sensitive man.
Super smart and humble.
I think he's a great husband and married a great woman.
He really just has a heart of gold.
Very good at showing us that it's not about how lucky we are, but how we can give back to those in the community around us.
Being Jewish is at the core of his existence.
And he leads by his actions, not just his words.
Spent a lot of time as kids in Israel and still to this day, and I think that's a lot to do with his care and passion for the philanthropy.
Lador Vador from one generation to the next.
After family, his business, it's community.
So Warren started as a volunteer, and then he went on to other leadership roles when asked to step up.
I've been fortunate to work with some amazing leaders at UJA as well, and I hear how great he is through them.
Warren has this amazing ability to disarm everybody at the table. He is fearless in taking on the most challenging issues in the community.
But he also had challenges during this time and challenging conversations, and he had to make some difficult decisions so that our community could benefit.
Whoever would have thought that this year would land on a year that was a worldwide pandemic.
Really address some of the biggest challenges that we face, and to allow everybody in the process to emerge feeling that we made the community stronger as a result.
And he really felt that it was important to take on leadership roles to leave a legacy for our children and grandchildren.
You have lived an interesting and exemplary life.
Bottom line, Warren, you have done an amazing job.
From nurturing your family, both parents, siblings, wife, children, from growing and developing and achieving great business success.
As chairman of UJA through incredible, difficult times.
And to providing your talents and your treasure to a range of community activities, and in particular the Jewish community.
Calm, capable, and unafraid to lead and make the hard decisions.
We all say thank you.
Warren, I think as your term comes to an end, I think you should have a great sense of pride in your accomplishments and know that the kids and I are extremely proud of the job you've done and the legacy that you're going to leave our community.
We love you, Papa.
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 Warren, it's truly been a pleasure and an honor working with you. And of course, we want to give Warren an opportunity to share a brief message as he passes the baton to our incoming chair, Linda Frum.
For Linda, I want to wish her a lot of success, and I'm right behind you, even though I'm on this side, I'm the oist. So I know you're going to do a great job because you are a professional leader by the real sense of it, and good luck.
Warren, thank you so much for those wonderful words of encouragement. I want to thank you once again for your exceptional leadership and for the inspiration of your example. It's an honor for me to be the incoming chair of UJA Federation's Board of Directors. And this now concludes our formal program. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. And while this is not our usual format for the annual meeting, we are pleased that so many of you chose to tune in from across the community, and we cannot wait to see you in person again when the public health situation allows for it. I want to thank Serena, Bruce, and Ariella for conducting tonight's formal governance. And I also want to thank all board members, including those who are completing their terms and for those who are incoming, for your commitment. A special thank you to Jeffrey Rosenthal, who I'm so excited to have as the new vice chair of the board. We are so lucky to have him, and I know he'll make an outstanding contribution. I also want to thank Adam Minsky and the entire UJA staff. They deserve a huge round of applause for making not only tonight's evening a success, but this past year, the weight they've carried on their shoulders. We owe them so much. They have led with professionalism and dedication. I want to thank you once again for joining us, for your continued support. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope to see you again very, very soon.